Hi, I'm Lippy. I'm a shamanic healer, and in today's video, I would like to discuss some of the lesser known effects of narcissistic abuse. If you look up narcissistic abuse on the internet or read books about narcissistic abuse, you will notice that it covers pretty much the same array of symptoms, and these include things like dissociation, low self-esteem, complex PTSD and PTSD, self-blame, over-responsibility, and confusion, among others. They are, however, in my experience, some particularly insidious symptoms which are as damaging and as much requiring of attention and resolution. And these are the symptoms that I would like to talk about in today's video. Number one, trance-like state of mind. I don't know if you recall, but there was this really famous show in the 90s called The X-Files. I'm sure everybody knows The X-Files. And there was this one episode I remember watching in which the two FBI agents, Scully and Mulder, they get trapped underground while investigating a suspicious fungi. And this fungi, it puts them into this trance-like state and makes them have these hallucinations while it starts eating them. And how they realize that they were in a trance state and they were having hallucinations and what they were seeing wasn't real is they realize that basically they're repeating the same actions and having the same conversations over and over again. So they're still in that trance state when they have this realization, and they know that something has happened to them because they're repeating the actions again and again, they're repeating the same conversations again and again. Of course, they finally get rescued and hospitalized because the fungus has sort of started to eat their skin, and they have all these injuries from that. But the reason I'm telling you this story is because it took me years to realize this, but I realized at one point that this is exactly what was happening to me when I was being narcissistically abused. That during those years that I was facing this abuse, I actually was in this trance-like state, and it occurred to me that I was in this trance-like state when I realized that I was repeating the same actions again and again, even if they weren't bringing me the results that I wanted. Compulsively, I was repeating the same conversations again and again. I was meeting the same people again and again and again, in different forms, in different bodies, in different shapes, but the essence was the same. And one day it just struck me. I suddenly remember this X-Files episode, and I was like, oh my god, this is what's happening while I am in this trance-like state and having these repetitive experiences. The narcissists in my life are having a field day sucking on my energy, and me being caught in these repetitive experiences is exactly the kind of distraction that helps them continue to use me as a supply. Now, when you are in this trance state of mind, you will realize that you also have or you're prone to either repetition compulsion, which is what I was just talking about right now, what happened in the series with the two FBI agents, and also what was happening in my life, and also something called circular thinking. What is circular thinking? Circular thinking is when we embrace a particular idea and our entire thinking goes around in circles around this one idea. When you're in a trance-like state, you also have a tendency to develop brain fog or disoriented and disjointed thinking. I remember years ago when I was being narcissistically abused, and I had no idea I was being narcissistically abused. I used to work in the luxury beauty industry, and I remember my boss sitting me down one day and saying, I don't understand it, Lippy. I see that you're very bright, you're obviously talented, and you work really hard, and you have these great ideas, but I've realized that you're not able to action your ideas in any kind of systematic, concrete way. You're not able to articulate your ideas. And he said, you know what, we're going to do this right now. I'm going to sit with you, and I want you to start writing down all these ideas in a way in which we can put them together. And I remember when I started writing down the ideas as he had suggested, I was quite alarmed to realize that the way I had written those things out, it was like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. Nothing was fluid, nothing had any continuity, nothing was sort of coming together. And basically, my boss was also very confused as to why everything on that paper looked so scattered, and he had to put everything together like a jigsaw puzzle finally. And now I look back and I realize that it was the brain fog, the trance-like state of mind, which includes the brain fog, that was causing me to not be able to have any kind of orderly or continual connected thinking. I also realized during that time that my handwriting started to get more and more sort of messy and disordered. And another symptom that I noticed I realize now, years later, was that making decisions, even small decisions, would be like a nightmare for me. And I remember once I was in Paris for a business trip, and I wanted to go to Amsterdam for the weekend because I was working through the week and I had 2 days off, 3 days off for the weekend. And I remember just a simple decision of, do I go to Amsterdam? And if I go, for how many days do I go? And what airline do I take? And who do I stay with? Even something as simple as that became a nightmare for me. It took me hours, and I wasn't able to figure anything out. And finally, one of my friends had to move in and step in and help me out and book my ticket and sort of help me out with where to stay. And I know it sounds silly, but when I look back, I realized that it was the brain fog. I was just so confused all the time, and my thoughts were constantly going around in circles, and it was very, very difficult for me to focus or have any kind of concrete direction. Now, this is so insidious that most of us who are being narcissistically abused or abused don't even realize or don't even see the connection between the abuse and this kind of trance-like state or a brain fog state. But it's no wonder that many victims continue to stay in abusive situations, because they simply don't have the clarity or the focus or the understanding to get out. Now, there's an amazing video on the trap of circular thinking. There's a channel on YouTube called Own Your Brain, and I strongly recommend this channel. I'm going to put it down in the comment section below. And this is a very interesting channel because it's about this woman who basically was in a cult for several years and was completely manipulated and brainwashed by this cult. And she's got these amazing videos on how mental manipulation works. And there's this one particularly amazing video on circular thinking and the trap of circular thinking. And I was just, when I watched her video, it suddenly made me realize that, wow, like, if you have been narcissistically abused, it's almost on the same lines as being part of a cult, because the narcissist actually manipulates you into circular thinking by manipulating you into focusing on one central idea, and that central idea could be focusing on the narcissist, or they could fill your head with so much self-doubt and so much self-loathing and self-shame that you could have a very sort of focused idea that you are a certain way, and all your thoughts can revolve around that. In my case, I had this one central idea that I'm a bad person, and this was because the narcissists in my life, and I had quite a few of those, constantly told me that. And when this idea was so central to my thinking that I would constantly seek approval from the very narcissists, because I constantly felt like such a bad person. And of course, we all know where that goes, because they would give you approval sometimes, and sometimes they would just pull it out from under you. So you were back to feeling like you were a bad person all over again, and it would just go round and round, and all my thoughts and all my energy was going in loops around this one central idea. Now, for several years, I remember also having this like chronic fatigue syndrome. And what I realize now was also that chronic fatigue syndrome is another sort of sub symptom of brain fog. I was tired all the time, and I was no matter how much I slept, I was constantly stressed out. I was constantly waking up tired. I was tired easily throughout the day. And again, I didn't realize then, and I realize now that this was all part of the brain fog. Now, very interestingly, medical research now shows a connection between brain fog and abuse. And the connection is this: the three main causes of brain fog, there are several other causes, so these are not the only causes, but the three main causes of brain fog, according to medical research, are basically: one, inflammation; two, an imbalance of cortisol and dopamine, these hormones in your body; and number three, wait, I have lost that page, right? Yeah, and number three is basically sleep deprivation. Okay, and all these are very much prevalent when you are being narcissistically abused. You basically are put under so much strain, so much stress, that you release huge amounts of these stress hormones, and your immune system is compromised, which is basically inflammation is your immune system becoming hyperactive. And all these also contribute to brain fog. So researchers are now linking brain fog to abuse as well. I have actually shared a link below to some great articles I found on this, and those articles were really amazing because they not only share or shed light on the causes of brain fog, but they also have some amazing solutions which you can apply. Number two, obsessive compulsive disorder. Now, OCD is described as having involuntary obsessive thoughts and feeling a compulsion to take certain actions that you don't really take willingly, that you just feel literally pulled into taking certain actions. And often if you see the representation of obsessive compulsive disorder in the movies like, for example, As Good As It Gets with Jack Nicholson, and you have The Aviator with Leonardo DiCaprio, you notice that they usually tend to cover this one aspect of OCD, which is like scrubbing your hands furiously or cleaning doorknobs to get rid of germs and things like that. But what I have noticed is there's a lot more to obsessive compulsive disorder than just compulsively washing your hands or cleaning doorknobs. And one of the things I have seen in victims of abuse, I've seen this in my clients, and I've seen this with some of my friends as well, and I've seen that there is a sort of a compulsive controlling behavior that I see in traumatized people. And this is the kind of controlling behavior which is not the same controlling behavior that is exhibited by malignant narcissists or sociopaths or psychopaths. I'm talking about people who are so traumatized that they're so hypervigilant that they need to control every situation and everything and every person, because to them order means safety. If they don't have order, they don't feel safe, because their backgrounds and their lives were so chaotic because of the abuse that they were subjected to, and they're so traumatized because of that they have this whole hypervigilance that basically that they think is keeping them safe, and that then becomes like a obsessive compulsive urge to control things and to control people. The other thing I've noticed, and this is in my own experience, in my own life, I noticed something like an OCD condition in my own life. Now I'm going to warp obsessive compulsive disorder a little bit here. I know I'm warping it, and I know I'm sort of going out of line here. But I noticed this where for years I was trying to get out of, I hate drama. I hate unnecessary drama. And I just found that, no matter what I tried, no matter what I did, I just wasn't able to avoid it. I wasn't able to get away from this unnecessary drama. And one day I suddenly realized, I'm like, wait a minute. The drama which I can't seem to get rid of from my life it's a little bit like an obsessive compulsive condition. Obsessive because what are obsessive thoughts? Obsessive thoughts are like intrusive thoughts you can't get rid of. The drama was like an intrusive event that I couldn't get rid of. And the compulsion was me being sucked into the drama even when I didn't want to be part of it. I didn't want to be part of this drama at all. And I was like, wow, this is not exactly OCD in the strictest sense, but it's an OCD-like condition. And I do believe that it is connected to me being narcissistically abused and me coming from that sort of history. I've also seen with OCD that you also have, for example, children who were brought up in highly authoritarian homes, who were sometimes very harshly punished for making mistakes. And I've noticed that many of these children, when they grow into adulthood, they are usually the ones who will be really frightened that they left the light on even though they've checked it 3 times. They would be the ones who are paranoid that they've left the gas on the iron on, or that they didn't lock their house properly. And I can't help thinking whether there's a connection between how they were harshly punished in their childhood for making mistakes and then developing this sort of compulsion in their adulthood. Because if you were so terrified of making mistakes and there was hell to pay as a child if you made a mistake, then maybe there is this part of you, this inner child part of you, which is terrified of making mistakes. And if it's an unhealed part of you, it's an unconscious part of you that you're not aware of, there are very high chances that it's going to come out in this sort of obsessive compulsive way. Number 4 is migraines. I'm sorry, I didn't realize I hadn't done number 3 yet. My mistake. Number 3. Let me make number 3 migraines, and I'll make number 4 number 3 because it'll be easier. So this is really, I know it sounds really crazy, but I have noticed a strong connection between headaches and abuse. And apparently so have some researchers. So I'm going to get into that in a little bit. But what I have noticed in my own case is whenever I'm under psychic attack, or whenever I'm around people who are controlling in some way, the first thing that happens to me is I start to get a migraine. I had made a video previously where I talked about how controlling people interact with you energetically. And one of the things that I was shown was that you will probably get migraines around people like this. And shamanically, we have this interesting way in which we operate, is we talk to everything. So in my case, I get migraines because I clench my jaw really tightly. And when I clench my jaw tightly for long enough, when I get stressed, I do that, and I get a migraine. It's like I get these mechanical migraines. And what I realized was when I spoke to my jaw, because that's what we do shamanically. I spoke to my jaw and I was like, why are you clenching so tight? What's bothering you? Why are you so uptight? And the answer that I got was because it said I felt trapped, and I was in a situation that I wanted to get out of but felt like I couldn't get out of. And that is so telling, because what is narcissistic abuse? It's like a trap. And it's not surprising that I was clenching my jaw in a situation where I felt trapped. Now, medical research has also linked migraines to trauma and abuse, because once again, migraines have been attributed to stress, to be caused by stress, and to also be caused by inflammation, both of which are things that are pretty much hallmarks of narcissistic abuse, because your body is put under so much strain and your body is put under so much stress that no wonder you develop physical symptoms as well. Number four, which was number three and now it's the other way around, susceptibility or vulnerability to other narcissists. Now it's very interesting. When I was completely in the narcissist web, I didn't realize then, I realize now, it took me years, and I started noticing that it wasn't just the narcissist or the narcissists who were in my life, whose web I was in. I realized when I was in that web, I was a source of supply to many other narcissists as well. Now, for me, the most accurate symbol of narcissism is really the spider's web with the fly stuck helplessly in the middle of the web and the spider sucking the life out of it, because that's exactly how narc abuse works. You are like this fly who's trapped and they are literally sucking the life out of you. And when you're in that web, when you're in that web of lies and deceit, there are changes in your energy field and in your vibration, which I think also causes other narcs to literally smell you like blood, like they smell the blood of you. And I saw this where, I was surrounded by narcissists everywhere, like my colleagues, my friends. I had narcissist lovers, I had narcissist bosses, and I didn't realize that till years later when I look back, and the more I studied narcissism and the more I studied what was happening to me, and I was like, oh my god, that guy was okay and that girl was, oh my god, they were all narcs, and I didn't realize that. And I didn't realize my vulnerability to them and susceptibility to them because of me being in that web. Now, I had made a video previously where I talked about this amazing author called Cyndi Dale, and her book, Enegetic Boundaries, mentions that if you have been abused in any way, there's a high chance that there's something called an energy marker in your auric field. And if you have this energy marker in your auric field, it sort of allows other abusers to come to you or to find you energetically. Now, I haven't checked my energy field for this marker yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was there, because I can very clearly see how there, I would attract narcissists. And the interesting thing is, what I realized is, when I didn't know about narcissism, I would attract very overt narcissists because I didn't know what they really were. And when I started to learn about narcissism, and initially what you learn about is the very overt, in-your-face narcissism. So I realized that those overt, in-your-face narcissists don't either come to you as much or they don't affect you as much when you start to realize who they are. But then you start getting all these really covert narcissists coming to you, or people who don't really appear to be narcissists for a little while, and then you scratch a little below the surface and you're like, oh god, okay, they're actually people with NPD, or at the very least some high amount of narcissistic traits. And again, I do put that down to it's like a symptom, because if you are in that web of abuse, this kind of situation also occurs. Number 5, procrastination. Now, arguably, procrastination could be a result of laziness. I personally don't believe it is, but let's say for the sake of argument that it may or may not be caused by laziness. But I have noticed that there is a kind of procrastination that comes from having very low self-esteem and low self-worth, to the extent that you don't get out and do the things that you really want to do, or you don't really put that energy into propelling yourself forward, simply because on a very deep level you feel like you're not worth it and you don't feel good enough about yourself. And since low self-esteem and low self-worth are very much hallmarks of narcissistic abuse, I have seen this time and again in my clients. I saw it in myself. For years I would miss important things and miss opportunities, and not get up on time, when I just getting up like an hour earlier could have done wonders for me, could have really sort of helped me get what I want. And I never understood why I was so reluctant to to go forward. Like there was something in me that would come up and sabotage me whenever I wanted to move forward. And that started to change when I started to meditate and started to engage in all these energy practices and started practicing shamanism. But it was only years later I looked back and I realized that this kind of procrastination was coming not from the conventional idea of so-called laziness, but more from the low self-worth and the low self-esteem that narc abuse subjects you to. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Please comment below and let me know whether you have experienced some of these lesser known symptoms yourself, or whether you have other lesser known symptoms that don't get talked about much. And I will see you soon. Thank you and goodbye.